Hey guys, today we're going to be discussing a topic I've actually wanted to do for a while, and that is how players develop an out of the park baseball. So I'm going to go over pitching, hitting, and fielding, how realistic each one is, and what I think a more optimal system would be. I'm just going to start prefacing this by saying it's probably very unrealistic in the near future that we get anything like what I'm suggesting, and this is just a for fun video. It's not really any real recommendations for out of the park because, again, very unrealistic to implement a lot of these things, I'm sure, with their current system. And yeah, pretty much just that. So with fielding, so you have a couple of base ratings with your catcher ability, catcher arm, infield range, infield error, infield arm, turn double plays, outfield range, error, and arm as well. And those are set for players pretty much. It's very rare to see those change or develop at all for anybody. You're going to have the same numbers pretty much your entire career until you start declining at the end, in which case they only go down. They almost never go up from the moment that a player is created. And then you train at positions by getting a certain number every day based on your personality and which position you're training at, towards your position training, which is out of 200. So as we can see here, this person is fully trained up at pitcher, and they're not trained up at any other position. Higher the number, the more complete your training is and the more effective you are at your position effectively. Overall, it takes no more than a season for most cases to fully train players at a position. The one exception is catchers who have really bad personalities who can occasionally take as many as 2 seasons to train, but it's really just that. Also note is that left-handers cannot train at second, third, or shortstop. So those positions are really right-hand exclusive, at least on the throwing side of things. So this system is not realistic at all, first of all. I'm going to start with that. While there are base skills that players maintain practically their entire careers, this is just not really representative of how it works. Players do develop their as OOTP has them, the core skills as they go on through their careers, or they lose out on it. You've got your range. Players can become more reflective or learn how to take better routes to balls, or they can have better instincts as they go on and play through their careers. That might increase their range. Error players can just become better at fielding balls. Arm, somebody builds up muscle mass and then all of a sudden they can throw the ball harder, faster, more accurately. Turn double plays, they get faster at transitioning the ball from the glove to their hand. They catch it in a better position to throw it onto first base or whatever, and then you can improve it that way. With catcher ability, receiving is actually something that players tend to improve a lot on. It's just a matter of practice, making sure you can catch the ball in the right position, pull your glove the right amount in the right way, uh, things along those lines. Catcher arm, that's a combination of how fast you are getting up, how hard you're throwing the ball down, where you hit the position player who's receiving the ball. All those things go into that. Those definitely a player can improve. Outfield range, again, it comes back to your reflexes and such. Air and arm, it's a lot like the infield in the regards that I was discussing earlier. So I think the fact that fielding ratings do not improve is just not right. I would love to see, and this is really basic. I think this is actually one of the things in my suggestions that Out of the Park could do. I would love to see fielding ratings be able to actually change, especially in younger players as they go on through their careers. Because a lot of guys, when they get drafted, all of a sudden they turn a corner in their reflexes, and then boom, they've got uh, they're really good at tracking down balls or something, and they become a much better fielder. Of course, fielding is one of the things that tends to be more constant for guys, but overall, it's definitely something that changes. And second is how players train at their positions. You don't just get better overall at every single thing at a very steady rate and be completely perfect within a year. That's not how it works. You work on individual skills and improve certain aspects of your training until you get to a point where now you are pretty much the best you can be at a position, but you're always learning new skills. So something I would love to see them implement is perhaps a system where And this is, again, not totally realistic, but they break down each component of fielding. So catcher ability, it could be where you receive the ball, pulling the ball in, blocking, and other things along those lines. And each of those has X percentage of catcher ability, which may not be a component you can see on the surface. And you set catchers to work on certain things, like you spend X percent of your time in training working on this. In games, you're going to focus on this skill or this skill. And they improve in that area until they're fully trained in that, and then they can work on each individual component. I mean, that's not totally different than the system we have here, and it's probably not the best way it can be done, but it is definitely, in my opinion, better than what we currently have. With ARM, it could be, like I was saying, pop time. It could be getting around the batter to throw to third base or something. And again, these things could affect different things, like getting around the batter is only going to affect throws to third base. It's not going to affect throws back to second, because all you have to do is just get up and throw in that case. And with catcher ability, blocking the ball is probably not going to help with pitch framing, just with passed balls. So that would be another interesting component if they could ever get that into the game. Overall, it would be, of course, just these individual skills. I'm not a coach, I'm not a player anymore, so I can't really say exactly what should go into this, but if they can get somebody who has a better idea or they find an article or something, that would be a really cool component to have in future games. So I'll move on to hitting now. With hitting, this is something that's a little bit more random. You have your potential hitting ability and your current hitting ability, and you're developing into your potential hitting ability. It's a very linear process. Hitters do tend to gain or lose potential. I think this is by far the most realistic system that out of the park baseball has got. But the thing that I am not so big on is there is the likely potential of a player, and then there is the ceiling of a player, the absolute roof where they could reach. And this is something I would love to see them implement, especially since they've got their tool and ability scouts. Two different types of potential. You could have the ability scouts better identifying the more likely ceiling, and the tool scouts were capable of identifying the top tier ceiling rather than the ability scouts being better at identifying higher level players and tool scouts being better at developing or identifying lower level players overall. So essentially, you've got a lot of younger players who you see them, let's say just guys who are international guys. They've got a lot of tools. It's just a question of what are they going to be able to do with them. So you could see them, it's likely that they will achieve, say, 50 grade contact, 55 grade power, 50 eye, or something like that. But they could potentially, if they like explode, reach, say, 70 contact and 65 power, or a 60 eye, or something like that. This is definitely something that we've gotten guys like Yasan Dominguez, Christian Robinson, and in terms of modern players, guys like Ronald Acuna. So it is a big part of how we develop, particularly high school and international prospects, and definitely a big part of how they are identified as well and desired. So it could be a type of thing where the modern potential or the more likely potential works kind of like it does now, except you're more likely to reach it maybe. And then the higher end potential is less likely to be reached. Like once you start developing beyond your likely potential to your high end potential, maybe you start getting much less likely to develop at that point. But you can do it, and it's more likely than just developing beyond your raw potential, as is pretty much the only way you could get to a really high point without a potential change. And really, with the batting system, it kind of bothers me how things develop as well. This is also a more minor thing, but gap power tends to develop first, and then you get like home run power and contact. Eye and avoid Ks come in a little bit slower for the average player. I don't really agree with this. I think players tend to develop their skill sets relatively well rounded. Sometimes the avoid Ks lags behind on guys, particularly power hitters, but it's really not common for guys to just be so far behind in one aspect of their development than everything else especially with the way that the system tends to work, players are targeted to develop skills more uniform. And the only other real suggestion I have for how batting ratings could work, and again, this is a very futuristic thing, is to break each thing down like it suggested with fielding and have players work on individual skills there where you set them to work on things. So for, let's say, avoid Ks, you've got your plate discipline. So how likely are you to swing at pitches outside the strike zone? How likely are you to swing at pitches you're unlikely to hit? And your contact rate, which is how likely you are to actually make contact with the ball when you swing at it. Your eye would pretty much exclusively be plate discipline. I guess maybe like your rate of putting the ball in play when you make contact. So how likely are you to have a foul ball might kind of play into how often you draw walks, but there's not really much else. With power, you could have exit velocity, launch angle, pull rate, that kind of thing. Gap power is pretty much the same, except really it's just going into a lower launch angle, more line drives than fly balls being preferred for that. Contact is again your exit velocity. Well, we'll go with BABIP instead of contact. That's a combination of your exit velocity, launch angles, pull rates, that kind of thing. And with pitching ratings, the last thing on the list. So I think in general, pitching just sucks. I don't really like how changeups never develop, first of all. It's Changeups are often referred to as a pitch where if you just throw it enough, you're going to develop at least a decent usable changeup. So why is it that changeups almost never develop to even a remotely usable state in OOTP? And we conveniently have a guy here with a 2055 changeup that almost certainly will never develop. So that was just coincidence. With pitching, pitchers very rarely happen to do pitches, and it's nothing to do with you. You should be able to, again, focus on exactly what you're having the pitcher work on. You could have them develop individual pitches. Say you want a pitcher who's got two pitches, really good stamina to develop a third pitch, and you could potentially add them to your rotation rather than having them develop as a reliever. Or you've got a pitcher who's got three pitches, but the third pitch is really bad, and you want them to really work on that pitch to get it up to a point where it's going to be usable. Or you're trying to get a pitcher to develop his control so that he's not walking so many guys. You should be able to emphasize that. And again, it comes down to that being able to break things down to their individual skills. So control could be uh, broken down for each individual pitch. How well do you command your fastball versus your curveball? Are you more likely to throw your fastball in the zone than your curveball? How hard is it to hit your fastball hard versus your slider or something like that? I think that would be a really interesting mechanic to add to pitching, being able to overall make pitchers more well-rounded. I think the current pitching system does a decent job of representing pitchers, but overall pitching is just so complicated that I think they definitely have a lot more room to improve here than anywhere else, especially considering that there is just each individual pitch works differently for a pitcher, whereas in here they just all get clumped together and your movement and control on each pitch are the same. All your pitches just play into your overall arsenal. There is no fastball. And also being able to set pitch percentage, I think, would be a really cool mechanic to the game. So how effectively will it go if you throw 35% fastballs and 65% curveballs versus 65% fastballs and 35% curveballs or something like that? That's really just about all I've got for this one. Just a couple of ideas on what I think could be done with the game in terms of player development. Let me know what you guys think of the chat for sure. I am very interested in hearing if anybody's got some cool ideas for how the game could work with development. And hopefully we will see some of these changes implemented in the future. Being able to control how your players develop would definitely be an awesome thing for the Park Baseball to add. So we will keep our eyes on how they adjust this in future variants of the game. I'll see you guys all in the next video.